Yeah, it's a lot of conference games.
Welcome in latest episode of that SEC podcast. I'm your host, Michael Bratton. I go by SEC Mike on Twitter, and that is none other than Steven Lassen, senior editor over at Athlon Sports, here to make his predictions for another weekend in the SEC. How's it going, Steven?
Mike, it is going great. It is a little hard to believe we are already in week 3. At the same time, I feel like I am still trying to get a good handle on a lot of these teams. I think maybe the theme of the early season, as you sort of digest what happened every week and you get a little closer to the next one, is it really feels like inconsistency. It feels like we've had a lot of interesting results, a lot of lopsided games early, some conference games in week 2 and 3. So I think we're still trying to figure these teams out. But man, thank goodness we got some great games this weekend as well to help us figure it out.
Yeah, we do. And if you're just watching, this is the first time you're catching us on a Wednesday, just be aware, after Steven makes his picks in an hour, we're going to go live again with Cousin Shane. But just want that to be made clear. And one time real quick, Steven, I don't know if you've seen this, but I got to share this as many people as I can. Shay's going to be down in Columbia. We're calling it Cousin Shay's Cock Walk. So just everybody be aware, if you're going down there to the LSU South Carolina game, meet Cousin Shane. He's going to be all over this place, starting at 9 a.m. through 11:30. He says he's going to try to leave at kickoff. I think he's going to get reeled into that stadium, Steven.
Yeah.
Just you watch. Cousin Shane is going to be live in Columbia, South Carolina, to make amends to Shane Beamer and those Gamecocks who he counted out. And I got a feeling there's going to be more people counting them out this weekend. So I don't want to tip anyone's hand here, but it's going to be a heck of a game this weekend.
Have they announced who is the guest picker for College Game Day yet? Just have something needs to share with you, or
maybe that's why he's down there.
That's why he's down there. But of course, he's going to be the guest picker when they have Missouri and Vanderbilt getting College Game Day next Saturday, right? 3-0, 3-0, right?
No, they need to go to Norman because that's where I'm going to be.
Yeah, man, that's the best part about the schedule. The next couple of weeks, it's just conference play. I mean, I love the good non-conference games, and it's great to get these. But man, when we start getting conference play, it's my favorite time of the year. We figure these teams out. We're getting to see matchups like Oklahoma and Tennessee for the first time as SEC members. So, man, just sign me up. I'm pretty much almost over the non-con stuff. Let's get to the SEC play, right?
No doubt. And sign me up also for giving a shout out to Cousin JR. Man, what a cousin he is. He just gifted another membership, this time to Drew Faison. So we appreciate you, Cousin JR. Every show he's gifting memberships out there. So welcome to the family, Cousin Drew. That's outstanding. And that's a perfect opportunity before we get into the picks for this weekend, at least Steven's predictions for this weekend. Got to remind everybody, we're brought to you by MyBookie, the online sports book. Head on over to mybookie.ag today. Put in that promo code, that SEC, that's THAT, SEC, over at MyBookie. If you sign up for an account today, they'll double your initial deposit all the way up to $1,000. You can have $2,000 in your account today for half that over at MyBookie with that promo code, that SEC. So, Steven, he's going to give us his picks there. How are you doing on the locks right now?
I think, let's see, we were 1-1 last week, so we're 1-3. We got some room to grow. It's the early season. We're working this out. I think I figured this out this week, though. You know, you guys make me go first, so that way I can make all the bad picks. Everybody can send their hate to me, and then you guys can make it sound better by, Thursday or so. But no, I'm just kidding, man. It's like I said, I think it's hard to figure out this, these teams early in the season. I mean, we talked about it Monday, but Northern Illinois beating Notre Dame, and we're going to get some results this weekend that don't make sense. So I'm going to try to make sense of it. I don't know if it's going to come out that way this weekend, though.
Well, I think you'll like this, Steven. Cousin Alex here. He says, if Shane is the professor, Steven is the dean. Let's hear these predictions. So
appreciate you.
We're going to get into it just 1 minute, but before we do, we got another reason we bring Steven on Wednesdays here is to make his PrizePicks selection. So if you're unfamiliar with PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports, and we love it because it's not just NFL or NBA or anything like that. It's college football over at PrizePicks. If you go over to PrizePicks right now, put in that promo code SEC. It's at the bottom of your screen if you're watching. If you play 5, you get 50 instantly. Over at PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports. It's very, very simple. You pick 2 to 6 players to go more than or less than their projections. And if you nail it, you can win up to 25 times whatever you wagered. So let's hear, Steven, this week's PrizePicks selections that you got.
So let's start with the LSU South Carolina game. And I am going to take Garrett Nussmeier more than 1.5 passing touchdowns. Pretty simple. I think if LSU scores, it's going to have to be through the air. I doubt the LSU running game is going to be able to get a lot of consistent yardage here, and we've seen short yardage. They have struggled this year. So I'm going to take Garrett Nussmeier more than 1.5 passing touchdowns. If I could, I would throw a little bit of a caution flag here. Check the weather before you play this one. Keep in mind the weather could be sloppy around SEC country due to some rain coming through. So if it looks like it's going to be torrential downpours, maybe don't play that on Saturday. But we're going to assume that things are okay. Garrett Nussmeier, more than 1.5 passing touchdowns. And for the South Carolina side, Mike, I like 2 plays here. More than 29.5 rushing yards for Lenora Sellers, and Rocket Sanders also more than 64.5 rushing yards. Can LSU stop the run? I think South Carolina is going to test that on Saturday, and I think if their best chance to win is you run the ball, control the time of possession, low possession game, and that to me tells me Sellers and Sanders are going to get a heavy dose on the ground on Saturday.
Man, so just by those selections, Steven, LSU on offense, South Carolina on offense. Sounds like that's going to be one heck of a game.
It is, man. I am really, and Cousin Shane's going to be. That's the story of this one, right? I mean, just the. I think if you had to guess, like this was not probably one of our marquee games for Week 3 at the beginning of the season, or like back in May or June, right? You wouldn't have guessed that probably. You would have said it was, I don't know, Texas A&M at Florida or, one of the other games on the slate. But because of the way these two teams have played in the matchup and, it's in Columbia, it's a good opportunity for South Carolina. So, yeah, I like Nussmeier, Sellers, and Sanders on the more than those 3 categories.
And then Cousin John, he's asking, where's James with the weather update? Stevens asked the same question before we went live. He said, please tell me he sent that in already. I said, no, he sends it in on Thursday. So to be more up to date as possible on the weather. So Cousin John, Cousin Steven, unfortunately, you're going to have to wait a day for the weather forecast.
That's a good reason to tune in on Thursday. I will admit, Mike knows a lot about me. He doesn't know that I'm actually a trained weather spotter, but I'm not nearly as good as James is about forecasts. So I'll leave it to him.
Okay, well, yeah, I had no idea. Yeah. So we'll have to trust your opinion on it too, because I am completely clueless when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah, hopefully we don't have to use my weather spotting knowledge at any point. Hopefully we're safe, but yeah, if we ever do, you know who to call.
So I apologize, Steven. Did you say that's all your PrizePicks selections for this week?
I've got a couple more, and we'll go to the A&M and Florida game. In the game where, much like LSU and South Carolina, I don't know that we're going to see a ton of offense in this matchup, but Connor Wigman, 0.5 passing touchdowns. I'll take the more than side in that one. I think with the injuries that Florida has in the secondary, pass defense was an issue last year. I don't want to touch the yardage on this one, but I want the touchdown. So give me Connor Wigman, 0.5 passing touchdowns, more than, and also give me the more than side on Le'Veon Moss at 70.5 rushing yards. I think if A&M wins this game, it's going to have to be getting Moss going, controlling the line of scrimmage. He's run well, I think, this season. And on the Florida side of things, I like Montrell Johnson more than 0.5 rushing or receiving touchdowns. So he just needs one to hit that more than total. So I'll take Montrell Johnson to get in the end zone on Saturday.
Yeah, no, I really like that Montrell Johnson one. I don't dislike the A&M ones, but I'm just, man, I like the Moss one better than Wigman because I'm still I think the jury is still out on Connor Wigman in this offense on the road. How about this, Steven? I didn't quite realize this till this morning, but I know this doesn't really have anything to do with the statistics, but A&M's not won a. Do you know off the top of your head the last time they won a road SEC game?
Man, it's a good question. It seems like it's been a while, hasn't it? I don't think it was last year.
It was 2021 Missouri.
Oh wow.
So
Yeah.
0-9 in their last 9 road trips in the conference. That doesn't include non-comp or neutral site games or anything like that. But I mean, again, will we be? Is it a new era under Elko? I don't know. We'll have to see come Saturday. But that is something there that they just can't win on the M road.
Yeah, and Kentucky can't win at home right now. I mean, what a strange, some strange statistics that we're seeing in the SEC. I would bet that the Mike Elko era changes that road stat here sometime soon, if not this week, soon.
Right.
What I would throw out to you on the PrizePicks selections, I'm a little bit on the fence. What about Eugene Wilson at 51.5 receiving yards? It's a tough matchup, but
I kind of like that one because I think that's. Now, we saw some of the other receivers kind of go off too last week, but certainly him and Mertz, and we still. That's another thing we should mention, Steven. We don't yet have the official SEC injury reports. Unfortunately, those come out about right when we're done. So, but the anticipation is Graham Mertz will be good to go. But point being, Graham Mertz, not only will he be good to go, but most believe that Billy Napier will start him. Mertz and Wilson, that's his go-to guy. That's who he's had that great rapport with. So I kind of like that one.
So through 2 games, Wilson has about 191 receiving yards, and he's been, last week's totals against Samford were great, 141, but he had 50 against Miami. So that's right there in that 51.5 mark. So I could be persuaded, I think, to add that to our totals this week and play the more than side of that. And heck, even if it's DJ Lagway, I think you have to like that because he might stretch the field a little bit more and it only takes maybe 2 receptions instead of 5 or 6 to get to that total if you're talking Graham Mertz and the more efficient stuff in the passing game.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. So, man, these PrizePicks selections are getting tougher each week. You know what?
Yeah, they are, man. I tell you sent those over this morning, and the first thing I did was, almost like panic because at first I didn't see any I liked, and I was like, I had to drill down a little more than usual. But I love college fantasy football, so I'm hoping we can get some prize picks and get the cousins out there some bucks this weekend on some of these picks.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, are you ready to make your selection, Steven, for Week 3 in the SEC? Let's get him some money via MyBookie as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's do it. I think we're going to gain some momentum this week on the picks, Mike. We've been up and down a little bit, but I think this is going to be our best week yet. Maybe.
All right, I'm going to save the league games to the end because those are the ones that we really care about the most on this show. So how about this laugher of a game here, Steven? Kansas State, Tennessee, in Neyland Stadium, of course. Tennessee favored by 49 points, over under 62.5. And I got these fancy new graphics that boggles Shane's mind, but essentially green is good. The darker the green, the better you are. And the purplish red, purple, whatever you want to call it, that's bad. And I'm seeing nothing but essentially bad for Kansas State. And I'm seeing essentially nothing but green for Tennessee. Kind of, you get to the point why it's a 49-point spread here.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to kind of be mean to Kent State, but I have Kent State rated as the worst team in the country right now after their loss to St. Francis on Saturday. Really, for Kent State, this is a paycheck game. Their athletic department needs these games for paychecks, and they've had some pretty brutal non-conference slates before. So this trip to Tennessee is kind of in the same sense. For Tennessee, to me, this is all about keeping everybody healthy, get ahead early, empty the bench, play as many guys as you can. And also with a matchup like this, you can kind of look ahead to Oklahoma a little bit. You don't have to focus so much on Kent State. I don't think Kent State will be within striking distance for too long in this game. So unless the weather is bad, and there's a chance it could slow up the Tennessee offense a little bit, I like Tennessee 62, Kent State 7. And by
Is that it? No.
that's it, right? I neglected to make this point on Monday, so I apologize to Tennessee fans. But I think one of the most impressive things about Tennessee in that game against NC State, it was actually the fact that Nico was probably like the fourth or fifth reason why they won that game. Their defense was awesome. The rushing attack, offensive line, defensive line. I mean, this is a really complete team for Tennessee. So I wanted to acknowledge the fact that how good Tennessee looked last week against NC State and kind of how this team is evolving. It shouldn't matter against Kent State, but I think it's a great sign as they go into SEC play.
How about this one from Cousin Benjamin? He says the Vols have not been favored by this many points since 1996. And, I mean, it's not a great trivia question, but, Steven, who was the quarterback at Tennessee in 96?
Be Peyton Manning.
Correct. So, that's what the era Tennessee fans yearn for, the 90s. You know what?
That's right. Almost feels like 98. 96 is pretty close. Yeah.
All right, so Tennessee rolling. How about this one, Steven? Intriguing, I think. UAB at Arkansas. Arkansas favored by 24 points, over under 60.5 total points. And it's intriguing not because I think like UAB is going to threaten Arkansas necessarily. Again, on this chart I got up here, the green is good, the purplish is bad. Seeing a lot of purple for UAB, particularly on offense. Seeing a lot of green for Arkansas. But for how this team will respond to such a difficult showing, letting that one slip through their fingers last week, should have beat Oklahoma State. How will they respond, Steven, in this? Again, this should be an easy win, but Notre Dame should have easily beat NIU too. You know what I mean? So it's just not the way it always goes in college football.
Absolutely. I mean, we have for anything can happen on any Saturday. I think we've seen that in history in college football, and also we've seen it a lot in this era of the transfer portal. You just never know week to week. I do like Arkansas to bounce back though, and UAB is coming off a loss to Louisiana Monroe, also one of the worst teams in the country. Trent Dilfer struggling in his second season in charge. One player for UAB that could make things interesting, it's Jacob Zeno, their quarterback. Alex Mortensen, former Arkansas, went to Arkansas in Alabama, off-field assistant, is their offensive coordinator at UAB. And I think he's done a pretty good job through 2 seasons. So if there is a concern, maybe it's the passing game for UAB, keeping this one close. But 2 areas for the Blazers that have struggled: offensive line and the defense. Their defense was awful last year. I'm not sure it's a whole lot better. So this is really the perfect opportunity for Arkansas to rebound with Auburn coming up. So I like Arkansas 45, UAB 13. Keep Taylor Green healthy, limit the rushing attempts, air it out, take care of business, and get out of there with the win and get ready for SEC play again with Auburn coming up.
Yeah, the most interesting thing from this game may be Trent Dilfer's post-game antics, because he's on that level where he'll say some wild stuff. You know, I love visiting these SEC stadiums and getting my paycheck and taking my whooping and going home. You know what?
Yeah, last year he threw a fit at his assistants during the game. It was not a good look for him, and he's struggling through 2 years at UAB. So, yeah, I think we could expect some interesting, perhaps, antics from the UAB head coach there.
All right, how about this one, Steven? On the CW, oh, my God, I hope I have the CW. I have no idea if I do. But Ole Miss at Wake Forest. Ole Miss favored by 23.5 points. Over under is 64 total points. So will Ole Miss continue to roll here, Steven?
I think so. And on the CW note, I will to give you a word of advice is last year there was a game I was trying to find in the middle of the game, and it was very hard to find. So word of advice, if you're an Ole Miss fan, you might want to find it right now before Saturday, so you don't spend 15 minutes trying to find it. So first of all, this Ole Miss team, They have won their first 2 games by a combined score of 128-3. The challenge goes up against Wake Forest, but still, this is a game that Ole Miss should be able to control from start to finish. The biggest strength for Wake Forest is the passing game. Hank Bachmeier, quarterback, and the receivers. They were missing their best defensive lineman against Virginia, and they also have questions in the secondary. This is Wake Forest. So I think if anything, this is now a third opportunity for Ole Miss to sort of fine tune things before you get into SEC play. Wake Forest will test your defense. It's a good chance to see what this number 1 defense can do against an FBS opponent. So to me, this is all about Ole Miss. I've got them 45, Wake Forest 17. I think they take care of business pretty easily in Winston-Salem.
Mm-hmm. So is that 45-17? I'm trying to do math in my head. That's always a bet. Is that you taking Ole Miss in the cover?
Taking Ole Miss in the cover, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, I like that pick, Steven. Again, tricky because it's on the road. I think it's imperative that Ole Miss jumps on them and just, you don't, again, upsets happen all the time. Freaking Cal just beat Auburn. That's probably not a great comparison because where Auburn's at, where Ole Miss is at, but they happen. You gotta jump on these teams on the road. Otherwise, you don't want to let them linger.
Exactly. I think it's almost you want to put them away early in the upset hopes because the longer you let some of these teams stay kind of hang around, you get the Cal, Auburn, you get the Northern Illinois, Notre Dame thing. So if you're Ole Miss, and we've seen Lane Kiffin not be afraid to do this, score early, score often, put them away, and get out of there with the win.
All right, how about this one, Steven? We've got UTSA at Texas. Texas favored by 35 points. The over-under is 53.5 total points. Is this going to be another non-competitive SEC game this weekend?
I think so. So UTSA is one of the better teams in the American Athletic Conference, but they lost their best player from last season in quarterback Frank Harris, and they've kind of struggled so far through the first 2 weeks of the season in the sense of they played a close game against Kennesaw State in week 1, and they got pounded by Texas State last week. So I think Texas takes care of business. Maybe you could see some sluggishness early on because of the Michigan win and maybe letting it hang over. I know Sarkisian's really trying to drill into them. You cannot let them hang around and be kind of the next Notre Dame kind of scenario. Would not be surprised to see Arch Manning play quite a bit the next 2 weeks. UTSA, Louisiana Monroe before the SEC opener against Mississippi State. I just think Texas too deep, too talented, just too good here. I like them 48-10 over UTSA.
How many touchdowns for Quinn Ewers?
Let's go with 4.
Oh, baby.
I think he gets 4 and gets out, and Arch Manning throws at least 1 on Saturday.
Okay. That's exactly what we want to hear.
Yeah.
All right, how about, okay, now, I mean, this could get interesting here, Steven. I hope not, for their sake. I have trolled them to no end. It's mostly because they're head coach. But New Mexico at Auburn. Auburn favored by 28 points, over under 61. They're being very coy what they're going to be doing. I mean, I don't think they're going to bench Peyton Thorne necessarily, not for this matchup anyway. But, man, what do you got here? And what are the chances that New Mexico can hang with Auburn on the plains here?
So the good news is this New Mexico team is not as good as that New Mexico State team that won at Auburn last year. New Mexico was not very good last year, and what I'm about to say is going to make no sense. They are better this year than they were last year, and they are 0-2 this year. I know that makes no sense whatsoever, but hang with me. They hired Bronco Mendenhall. He's a really good coach. They have been very competitive for the most part. They lost to a good FCS team in week 1, and they gave Arizona a lot of trouble in week 0 for Montana State, week 1 for Arizona. The problem is New Mexico's defense is giving up almost 9 yards a play. If Auburn doesn't have a good day offensively here, that's alarming because New Mexico has struggled to stop the pass. They have struggled to stop the run. They're just struggling in general on defense. I'm going to take New Mexico to get a kind of a late cover here, because I think their offense is good enough to move the ball. They have a quarterback in Devin Dampier who's good enough. I think we saw this against Arizona. He can move around, can create some plays through the air. Long way of saying Auburn wins, but New Mexico gets a late cover. I got them 45-17. Biggest thing I am watching for is that Auburn offense, Auburn quarterbacks. Just want to see something. You want to build some confidence here with Arkansas coming up.
What happens? I'm trying to create a realistic scenario because I can't even get to the point where I'm saying, like, what if it's tied at halftime? Because, it should be nowhere close to that. But what if, like, the first possession, like a receiver slips and Peyton Thorne throws an interception? What will happen on the plains down there if something like that were to happen?
How many boos are we going to hear in unison right away? I think it kind of gets at the quarterback thing, which is I think if you're Auburn, at some point you got to see what someone else has, right? I mean, you know what you're going to get out of Peyton Thorne. I think you know his ceiling and you know his floor at this point. SEC plays coming up with Arkansas. If you're messing around with quarterbacks in SEC play, you got a chance against a defense that has struggled to air it out, let somebody else get in there. If Peyton Thorne struggles early, I would make the switch if I'm Hugh Freeze. I mean, I know they've kind of pared down supposedly the playbook and the package of plays, but I still think I want to see somebody different at quarterback.
I just looked it up, Steven. He's got 38 interceptions in his college career. So, again, I'm not trying to bag on him, but it's just I think he's just shown us who he is.
Yeah, I think by this point you know who he is, and also, like I said, what his ceiling is. Mm-hmm. And also, in fairness to him, Auburn's got to figure out the offensive line too.
Right. All right. Maybe on a more upbeat tone, Steven. How about Toledo at Mississippi State? Mississippi State looking to bounce back. They're favored by 11.5 at home, and the over/under is 60 total points. Does State bounce back after a tough road loss last weekend?
I do. I like Mississippi State to bounce back this weekend. So Toledo has been one of the MAC's better teams in recent years. They were an 11-win team last year, but they lost their quarterback and running back to the transfer portal. So they're kind of cycling over a little bit. They are still one of the favorites in the MAC this year. And also, anytime we talk about the MAC, worth pointing out, Northern Illinois won. Mm-hmm. Bowling Green pushed Penn State. So sort of beware here if you're Mississippi State. But I think if there's a reason to think Mississippi State bounces back. Toledo's offensive line is brand new. Quarterback with just a couple starts, going on the road in a tough environment. So I want to see Mississippi State's defense, how it responds. I want to see how the offensive line responds. Toledo racked up 15 tackles for a loss last week against UMass. So their defense is pretty solid, but I still think Mississippi State at home, Blake Shapen, I think they rebound. Give me Mississippi State 34, Toledo 24.
And, to be quite honest with you, not that it's a huge surprise, but I've assumed Mississippi State under Jeff Lebby, they'd be very productive through the air. But just looking at some of Shapen's numbers, and I know it's just 2 games, and there's one FCS in there, but I've been pleasantly surprised by how effective this offense has been. Now, again, they had mistakes. Defense is what killed them in that last matchup, but I think we're on the right path here, particularly on the offensive side of the football.
Totally agree. And I think it's just 2 games, but I think you have to be encouraged about the progress so far and also about what it could be a couple weeks down the road. And I think last week's game just showed when you have 5 new offensive line starters, some question marks at running back and also defensive questions too, they kind of all got exposed at Arizona State. So it was a bad year to play Arizona State. If you got the Arizona State from last year, you probably would have won if you're Mississippi State. But I think offensively there's a lot to be pleased about so far.
All right, how about this one, Steven? This was very intriguing to me. Vanderbilt at Georgia State. Vanderbilt favored by 10.5. It opened around 8, I think, but it has shifted towards Vanderbilt, 10.5 now. Over under 46.5. The low overall total here. Who wins this matchup?
I like Vanderbilt. And I think just in the big picture sense, it's important just to get to 3. You're halfway to bowl eligibility. The good vibes continue for Vanderbilt for another week. I mentioned this on our Monday show, but I mean, Georgia State's got the all-star staff of ex-SEC guys. I mean, Dell McGee is the head coach, and it's just in his first year. But you got Jim Chaney, Kevin Shearer, and Damian Craig all on staff at Georgia State. So it's really kind of an interesting collection of coaches, and I think eventually they'll do well at Georgia State. But they were picked near the bottom of the Sun Belt East. A lot of turnover on both sides of the ball. Christian Veillere, you may remember him. He was a pretty highly touted prospect at quarterback coming out of high school. He was at Penn State, Pitt. He's Georgia State's starting quarterback. So they have struggled so far on defense, and they played Georgia Tech in week 1, played Chattanooga last week. So I like Vanderbilt to rebound here, or I should say keep the good vibes going. 31-17, they beat Georgia State. I would like to see Diego Pavia maybe cut back a little bit on the rushing attempts, maybe spread the ball through the air a little bit more, make sure you keep him healthy for the heart of SEC play coming up. But I'm just being really picky because I think Vanderbilt wins and covers this weekend.
Yeah, leave it to Diego Pavia, Steven. He's the only guy I think I've seen utilize the triple option and jump while pitching the ball to a player. So, I mean, he sure is fun to watch. But and I saw someone asked in the comments, I think it was JC, Clark Lee is calling plays now. So I on the defensive side of the football. So I think that has certainly helped. And it's just so smart, Steven. They're finally embracing what people have been saying for a long time Vanderbilt should do. They're essentially running the triple option, and they're playing good defense, and they're shortening the game, and they're limiting possessions, and they're not running Paul Johnson triple option. They're it's an updated spread shotgun triple option, which is I think that's maybe not the only path, but it's the smart path at Vanderbilt.
Absolutely. I mean, you saw this too with like Coastal Carolina under Jamie Chadwell, and now at Liberty. You run some kind of hybrid spread with the rushing game and the quarterback run. I mean, it's an updated version, I guess, of the option, and I think it's working well so far for Vandy. That's kind of why I would like to see Pavia maybe cut back a little bit on the rushing attempts, just as you keep him healthy in the SEC play. And also, I loved his thing after the Virginia Tech game. He's taking offense to people calling him a poor man's Trace McSorley. That's a pretty good comparison. I mean, Trace McSorley was a good quarterback at Penn State, but maybe it's that Michael Jordan thing. You just you invent things to be mad about, and it makes you play better. But man, he is so fun to watch every week. So give me the Commodores this week.
All right, how about this one, Steve? Now we're getting into really intriguing games, in my opinion. Tulane at Oklahoma. Oklahoma favored, but only by 13.5. I would imagine this spread would be significantly higher just a week or two ago. The over-under point total is 47.5 total points in this ball game. Steven, can Oklahoma rebound from again, they're still undefeated. They're 2-0. Everything's in front of them, but it's just based on some of the fans, it feels like doom and gloom. Is it doom and gloom this week, or do they bounce back?
It's funny to compare 2-0 Vanderbilt and 2-0 Oklahoma, right? The vibes are totally different despite the record. I think I said this on the Monday show, but I think Tulane is the toughest test Oklahoma has faced this year. You don't have to believe me. Bill Connolly's rankings at ESPN, Tulane is ranked number 60 in the SP Plus this week. Houston is 91st. So this is the toughest test that Oklahoma has faced this year. Now, if you want to look at it on the bright side for Oklahoma, Tulane had some issues last week against Kansas State versus the run. They gave up 5 sacks. Kansas State's got a pretty good defense. I think Oklahoma's is probably better. So you're getting Tulane in Norman a week after they showed some vulnerabilities, and you also have a quarterback for Tulane in Darian Mensah, who is very talented, but he's also making his third start, and this is his first start on the road. I think Oklahoma will bounce back a bit this week, play better than they did against Houston, but I think Tulane keeps this one close. So I'm going to go Tulane 20, Oklahoma 27. So that gives Tulane the cover, but Oklahoma the victory.
Oh, man. And it would be the most upset 3-0 in the country,
Yeah.
Steven.
Could maybe some good news though for Oklahoma if Nick Anderson comes back this week.
Yeah.
I am the offensive line is still going to be a concern, and maybe they get some guys healthy going forward. But this Tulane defense, I know they struggled last week, capable of creating some problems. John Summerall, we talked about him on Monday. I think he'll have the head coach there. He will have Tulane ready to go on the road. So it may not be pretty, but I think Oklahoma finds a way, and but Tulane gets the cover.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know who loves to hear that. He probably wish you'd pick an upset. But Cousin John, appreciate you. He says, best CFB chat on YouTube, MIZ. Thank you, Cousin Jeff. But, so some of these games we've hyped up, Steven, for Oklahoma. Like Tennessee, like Missouri. Hell, they may not even be games if Oklahoma can't turn this thing around. And I'm not saying they won't be able to, but I'm getting concerned. I'm hoping it was just a one-game fluke. But like Venable says, I mean, it's injuries is what it is, and I don't know how you work around that when you're essentially. I think they're on their fourth center right now, and they got guys banged up left and right, and I don't know. You just gotta hope Jackson Arnold plays a heck of a lot better Saturday than he did last Saturday.
Absolutely, and there's an early kind of season thing going on to some extent too. Like I wonder if Oklahoma is holding back a little bit as they kind of break into the SEC, get ready for that Tennessee game, knowing that you don't need to go 100% to beat those teams. But last week was a little bit too close to comfort. And now you're getting a Tulane team that's even better than Houston. So I would be worried. And not only that, Tennessee. I mean, that was a game that was kind of a toss-up-ish kind of game this offseason. I mean, Tennessee just got done demolishing NC State. Maybe NC State's not as good as we think. But, all of a sudden games that look like toss-ups, if Oklahoma continues to play this way, and even you can make the case that in that game against Temple, they won 51-3, but there was a lot of in-game concerns that you picked up on. So this will be a pretty telling week, I think, for the Sooners. I'm curious to see how they bounce back.
How about this comment from Cousin JC? I'm just curious if you would agree with this, Steven. If Jackson Arnold plays like he did against Houston, if he plays that way against Tulane, he's saying Tulane will win this football game. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I mean, I think I said this on the Monday show. I think if Oklahoma plays like they did last week, they will get beat. Tulane is capable of going in there and winning this game. So he's got to be better, but also it's not just him. I mean, they've got to stay out of third and long situations. They've got to be better on third down. Some of that's the run game, obviously offensive line. Also got to get Nick Anderson and some of those receivers back too. He's got to play better, but there's also another layer to this, and that's the supporting cast.
Right, and again, we can sit here and bemoan how you've looked, but we were saying the same things about South Carolina. Now they're hosting College game day, and it can turn in a hurry. You know what?
A win is a win. They say this about in basketball. When you get to the tournament, you win in advance. You find a way to win. If you're Oklahoma, just keep stacking W's. You get guys healthy. All of a sudden, your season could look a little more promising in the SEC. So just find a way to win. That's all that matters.
Right. And speaking of winning, Steven, one more time, got to remind the audience to head on over to MyBookie Online Sportsbook. Listen to the Dean win this weekend over at MyBookie with that promo code SEC. That's THATSEC. They're willing to match your initial deposit on each and every one of these games. So let's get into it, Steven. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on Alabama going on the road to Wisconsin here. The Crimson Tide favored by 16 points on the road, Steven. What? Over under 50.5 total points. But man, I was rewatching the game, and South Florida was, again, I don't know how good Wisconsin is, but they've got more talent than South Florida. I don't know, but they were winning the line of scrimmage often against Alabama. So this has got me really concerned here. What's your thoughts on this matchup?
Yeah, it's I think a reason to be concerned about Alabama. Obviously, the biggest question is going to be Caden Proctor and whether or not he plays this Saturday, because there was a noticeable difference in the Alabama offensive line, and how you get this group figured out. Elijah Pritchett being healthy could also help too, because when he was healthy on the right side, it seemed like the offensive line kind of settled in, or at least the offense was able to get some big plays there. So, seeing Alabama go up to Big Ten territory, Madison is a tough place to play. I could see Wisconsin hanging around here. There are some personnel things for the Badgers that I think is going to make it hard to win this game. And the first one is going to be their defensive line struggled, I think, a little bit to stop the run against Western Michigan. They've had some turnover and injuries there. Luke Fickell, the head coach, is very good at defensive schematics and stuff. So it wouldn't surprise me if they have something cooked up for Jalen Milroe. And they've played South Dakota and they've played Western Michigan. Do they need to show everything through the first two games? Probably not. But I think for Wisconsin to win this game, it's going to be stopping the run. And then they're also offensively, they are going to have to get some big plays too, because they have just been sort of 13, 14 play drives. That will not beat Alabama on Saturday. So I think this game will be close early, but I think Alabama's rushing attack and Jalen Milroe on the ground pull away in the fourth quarter. So give me Alabama 34, Wisconsin 17.
Okay, well, and then all will be right in Tide Land again if you're taking care of business. But leading up to this epic showdown in a couple weeks, they got a bye week, but then they get Georgia. Man, I can't wait for that one. You know what?
You sound a little skeptical on my predictions, so that's.
Well, I literally just got done watching that game, and I'm just shaking my head, thinking, I don't know, Steven. I mean, I just ride the wave of emotions. Week one, I was thinking, my God, this may be the best team in the country. Now I'm saying, I don't even know if they make a bowl game. You know what I mean? It's like, I kid when I say that, but
you did say they were a decaying dynasty last year. Does that carry over into 2024 still, or
no?
Okay.
No, new era. This is new coach. That was mostly about Coach Saban, which that's why he's on College Game Day, because he's in decay. But you know who's not in decay here, Steven? And that is, of course, Mizzou, the ranked matchup, the only ranked matchup of Saturday. There is one on Friday, but Friday's for high school anyway. So, Steven, thoughts on this epic matchup here? I mean, I'm looking at number one pass offense in the country, number one pass defense in the country, at least according to the analytics. Boston College, they're on the offensive side. Mizzou's on the defensive side. A lot of great matchups in here, but Missouri's a big favorite, 17-point favorite at home over Boston College, and the over-under's 54 total points. How good of a game is this going to be?
I think it could be pretty competitive. I will say on the front end, I like Missouri to win here. There's a kind of pick your path option with BC because they played Florida State in week one. Florida State's offense is struggling a lot right now. They played Duquesne last Saturday. So they've had an opportunity to pad their stats a bit on the defensive side of the ball. They were not one of the ACC's better defenses last season. So they have a new coordinator, Tim Lewis, under Bill O'Brien, the new head coach. They changed some things schematically. Maybe they're better. But I kind of want to wait and see on this BC defense. I do think the one area that could give Missouri some trouble is Thomas Castellanos, their quarterback, and their rushing attack. And I think this will be a good test for Missouri's defense. With all the new faces, with the new coordinator and Corey Batoon, I am very interested to see how this defense plays, because it's not just the skill talent. BC has a good offensive line. So if Missouri dominates, that's a great sign as they go into SEC play. Also, I'm going to take Brady Cook and those Missouri receivers to have a nice afternoon too. I know BC's defensive stats are good so far, but I think this Missouri offense hits a big player too that's been missing. So give me Missouri 34, BC 17. They get the late cover.
Oh, so let me ask you this. Now that we know Vanderbilt's pretty good, this would have been laughable to ask you a couple weeks ago, but what is the tougher matchup you think for Missouri? Is it Boston College or is it Vanderbilt?
I would probably go BC.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're pretty comparable. BC, I think most people probably have them as a top 40, I should say probably top 30 team. They were kind of knocking on the door in some top 25s that I saw. Vanderbilt a little bit closer to 45 probably in some power ratings. So it's close, but I would probably go BC.
And is it perhaps accurate to say many people have kind of, I don't know if written off is the right word, but just kind of, when Bill O'Brien got to Boston College, I'm trying to think of the timeline. Wasn't he like Ohio State offensive coordinator, and then in the middle of the night basically became BC coach, and people are thinking, oh Lord. But I know he didn't do like fabulous in the NFL, but he won a couple division titles, I believe. I don't follow NFL too closely, but I mean, you can't be an idiot and do that. So I think he might be a really good coach, at least college.
I think for BC, he's kind of the perfect hire. He's from that area. He coached with the Patriots, obviously. I didn't think very highly of his tenure as Alabama offensive coordinator, but I think for BC, I think it's a good fit. And also, to your point, he was hired late because Jeff Hafley left to be the Packers defensive coordinator. So it was pretty late in the process. I think late January, early February. For Boston College to hire Bill O'Brien at that point in the season is a heck of a hire. And I think this also gets at kind of the intrigue for me is watching them last year, watching them this year. If you're Missouri, how do you make sense of that? Because you know what Bill O'Brien wants to do. Castellanos is so good. You're trying to figure this out. They didn't really need to do a whole lot to beat Florida State because Florida State didn't play very well, and Duquesne is an FCS team. So I think that there's a little bit of Missouri. It may take them a quarter to kind of get a good beat on what BC is exactly trying to do here.
Mm-hmm. Well, shout out to one of our favorite cousins here, Cousin Rick. Just gave us a nice donation here. Looking forward to playing the Gators. Love the show. Beat the hell out of Florida. So that let's just for you, Cousin Rick, let's jump to that one. Let's do Texas A&M, Steven, at mighty Florida. Well, they used to be mighty, but maybe they will one day again. They ain't favored, though, unbelievably. At home, A&M favored by 4.5 points. The over-under is 47 total. And again, A&M's not won, Steven, in conference play on the road in 10 league games all the way back to 2021. Does that change? Who you got in this match? It feels like a must-win for both these two. I think you muted yourself, Steven.
Sorry about that. We're back.
No worries.
I was going to say, I think this is one of the biggest mysteries of the week. Don't you agree?
Oh, absolutely.
I have no idea what to make of this game.
You could tell me A&M wins large. You could tell me Florida wins large. Or you could tell me they blow one another out. I would not be shocked. But I do think it'll be a very close game.
I agree with you on that one. And in fact, there may not be a whole lot of points in this one. And so the under is very much in play, I think, for this game. So I go back to week one. There's a lot of similarities between these two teams, sort of high expectations, week one losses, and now they're trying to bounce back in week three. And I think it's a critical game because it's not necessarily one of those games where it's a fork in the road or anything like that, but it does really feel like whichever team can win this game sets up itself to build a little momentum in the SEC. And for Florida, of course, it's Billy Napier on the hot seat. If he can win this one, it cools it down for a week. So there's just a ton of mystery here. I'm interested to see about the two quarterbacks in this game, or three. How does Graham Mertz play? DJ Lagway, how much does he play? What does Connor Wigman look? How does he perform? The receivers for A&M as well. How does Florida's offensive line hold up against Texas A&M's defensive front? There is a ton of intrigue and mystery in this game. I think A&M's defense is the best group in this game. I have no idea, honestly, who wins. But you asked me to make a prediction, so I'm going A&M 24, Florida 20 in a close game. So.
If that's how it plays out, Steven, if Florida drops a close one, I mean, I hate to do it. We're going to be doing this every dang week till it actually happens. But does Florida fire Billy Napier if they lose this one, or do you think they'll hold on to him?
I think they will wait. I was looking at the bye weeks for Florida. October 26th. Yeah, after the game against Kentucky on
Right.
October 19th. This is actually an interesting discussion too, because you think about how coach firings and transfers and everything has been sped up. So if you are Florida, and let's say they lose to Mississippi State, at that point you'd be 1-3, and you have the questions that you had after the Miami game, maybe. But I think probably October is the firing time for a lot of these coaches.
Mm-hmm. And, this is jumping way ahead. It's probably unfair to even ask you this, but I like to ask unfair questions here, Steve. If A&M beats Florida, I think they could still rebound and have a really nice season. I mean, I think I'm not saying it's key to the whole thing, but I think that could get the ball rolling. What would you say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the good thing for A&M, and this is also true with Florida, is that loss was a non-conference loss. Once you get into SEC play, you have a chance here to win this game. You got one more non-conference game if you're Texas A&M before Arkansas coming up, and then Arkansas is in Arlington. That series has been crazy. You get Missouri. LSU looks pretty vulnerable too. Tricky road games there for A&M with Mississippi State, South Carolina, and Auburn, but it's still all in play. And A&M has room to grow. They've got to get the offense going, but I think you still feel good about the defense, even though they gave up some possessions late in that Notre Dame matchup. So it feels like if they can win this one, they can just stack some wins and get better over the rest of the season.
Well, speaking of stacking wins, how about Georgia? Go it all the road, Stephen, to Kentucky. Was supposed to be college game day. Now it's fire Mark Stoops day. But Georgia favored by 24 points, over under 45 total points. I mean, my goodness, Stephen, after what we saw from Kentucky last week, can they even, I mean, the real question is, can they make this competitive?
I don't see how. I mean, I hate to be so blunt right off the bat, Mike, but if Kentucky couldn't score against South Carolina, are they going to be able to put together enough drives to beat Georgia? And I just don't see it. I think Georgia's defense is better than South Carolina. Obviously, too, Georgia can hurt you a lot more ways offensively than what South Carolina did. I think if you're Kentucky, maybe the optimism would be you just don't have the turnovers. Maybe the weather kind of impacts it. If Kentucky is going to win this game, they will need some breaks. They will need a special teams touchdown. They'll need a defensive touchdown. So I just think a lot has to go right for Kentucky to win this game. Worth noting, in the last 5 matchups between these two teams, Georgia has gone over 31 points just one time, and that was last year. So the series trend tells us that this could be a lower scoring type game. So I'm going to take Georgia 31, Kentucky 6.
So how do they get to 6, Stephen? I mean, it must have been some kind of special teams miscue by Georgia or a turnover or something. But no, I kid. But yeah, I mean, that's heck. I mean, Now, I was about as down on South Carolina this last week as I am on Kentucky this week. So I get it. I'm just going to keep saying the same thing. A lot can change in a week, but it's not looking good.
I think maybe if you're Kentucky, and I think, obviously the offensive line is still a massive issue. You're going to have to use probably some tempo, get the ball out of Vandergrift's hands quickly. The problem with that is you have to get first downs to kind of set that up. And I don't know they can string together enough drives. And eventually it just feels like Kentucky's defense might, they can bend a little, but eventually they break under too much pressure. So I just think Georgia's too good. Maybe Kirby, gets out of there if it's messy weather with like 24-0 and that's it. I mean, it's tough to find a path here for Kentucky. I apologize to all the Big Blue Nation for being so negative here.
Well, it's all right. They're pretty negative right now themselves, Stephen. But where they're not negative, where College Game Day is going to be game of the week here, LSU at South Carolina. Stephen, what a fascinating game. LSU favored by a touchdown, 7 points on the road. Over-unders 50.5 total points. Man, I've gone back and forth. one day I'm thinking one team's going to win. The next day I'm thinking the other team. Where are you at with this one, Steven?
Kind of like Texas A&M and Florida, I really think there is a ton of mystery with this matchup. There's not a ton of mystery in the sense that the two strengths in this game are Garrett Nussmeier and LSU's receivers and the South Carolina defense. LSU's offensive line is so good at pass blocking. That sort of kind of makes you think they can keep Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart and those guys away from Garrett Nussmeier. But if LSU is going to win this game, I think number one, they've got to stop the run, because kind of like we talked about at the top, if South Carolina, I think maybe their best chance to win this game, and they're not a huge underdog, so it's not a heavy lift, but it's lower possessions, Sellers and Sanders running the ball, getting into the end zone, limiting Garrett Nussmeier's attempts and the possessions by LSU's offense. Very doable for LSU here, for South Carolina here. So can LSU stop the run is a big question. And on the other side, LSU's rushing attack is struggling, but what do you get out of Nussmeier? Like, can you get a big play or two for this LSU offense? So this one's tough, Mike. Like you, I have gone back and forth. I also think it is kind of crazy that these two teams have not played in Columbia since 2008. So it is nice to see LSU going to South Carolina. Rain potentially in the forecast. I'm going to take a lower scoring game. LSU 24, South Carolina 20. That's kind of a last minute call too. I left it blank on the sheet here. So.
Go with your gut.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be something very similar, and I don't know who's going to win. Like I said, I just don't know about it, Steven. But I do think it's going to be a heck of a game.
Yeah,
and I think could really propel South Carolina. It could doom LSU. Man, I don't know, but would Shane Beamer be your SEC Coach of the Year after 3 weeks if they could win this game?
I think that's fair. Yeah, I would probably go with him as like the SEC Coach of September. Let me ask you, what in evaluating this matchup, is there any area that you have a higher level of confidence? Because like Texas A&M and Florida, I like the A&M defense in that game. When I was looking through this one, it's kind of like strength on strength and I would relative weakness on weakness when LSU's defense in South Carolina is out there. So do you have any kind of feel for kind of that?
Not necessarily a position group, but I would, and I've asked a lot of people this question, so I should probably answer it myself, but I think the coaching staff for LSU is significantly better than in South Carolina. So I think that is an edge to LSU. Now, it doesn't always mean anything. I would have given them an edge against Southern Cal too, but
yeah,
it didn't play out that way. So that's one. I think South Carolina's ability to run and LSU's inability to stop the run, that's if we're going, I think that is one to highlight for sure.
And also no Jacoby and Guillory this week too. Rest of the year for LSU.
Mm-hmm.
How does the next wave or what does LSU do defensively to make up for some of those things? So I think we had week one. A lot of cases there were a lot of blowouts. We have week two. We're trying to figure out what's going on. By now, week three, we're going to get some good data and some good matchups this week. Try to learn a little bit more about these teams.
Yeah, I can't wait for it, Steven. But hey, that's going to wrap us up on this episode of the show. Before you go, as always, can you tell everybody how can they follow you and how can they find your work?
Absolutely. You can follow me on Twitter at Athlon Steven, and you can also follow me over on Instagram and Facebook, Steven L. CFB.
All right, so everybody stay tuned. We got Cousin Shane and a terrific mailbag edition coming up. So we're going to stop this one and fire up another. But we're going to catch you on the next one, Steven. I appreciate you as always. And I'll be back in about 2 minutes.